So you want me to address the biggest issue of RV living. Whether you're living in a bus, whether you're living in an ambulance, a van, any type of RV whatsoever, the biggest issue and the biggest thing that I get asked is how to deal with humidity, how to deal with mold, it's so confusing. It's not that hard. So first of all, let me say a couple things here. First, I live in southern Alberta, Canada. It's dry here. So I have a big advantage over most people just because of that. But when I go to Vancouver, when I go into wetter areas, it's the same thing. I don't have a mold problem. I don't have a moisture problem. And I figured out how to deal with it. But another thing that helps me big time is I'm only one person in my vehicle. Now, I could have multiple people in the vehicle. How I've dealt with it will work as well. And I'm going to talk towards the end of this video about how I've dealt with it and how it's worked in my truck camper, how it's worked in my motorhome, and how it works great in my van. But let's talk about where humidity comes from. First of all, humidity comes from several different sources. The big one, and it's a huge one, is cooking. And I hear people all the time say, well, I cooked at home and I didn't have a problem when I cooked a pot of pasta and I boiled all that water for 20 minutes. Well, I'm sorry, but most homes have air exchange. Whether you have the fan on over the stove or not, and many people don't even run that, most homes have an air system that whether you're running the furnace or not, there's some air exchange in there. So even if you are cooking, the air gets exchanged. In an RV, it doesn't do that unless you turn on a fan, turn on a vent. So you got to watch for that. You got to be careful when you're cooking. Number two, the other big one is people with washrooms in their vehicle and a shower. And again, I hear people all the time saying, well, at home I never ran the exhaust fan and I never had mold. Well, you may want to go back and check your place. I bet you did have mold. You just didn't notice it. But again, when you're showering in a bathroom and you leave the bathroom and you come back 2 or 3 hours later, it seems like it's dried out. It really hasn't dried out that much. But in a van, you know it doesn't dry out at all. And number three, where it comes from. It comes from us breathing. It comes from us perspiring. So how do we deal with it? What's the best ways to deal with it in an individual basis? Well, let's go through them really quick. First way, cooking. If you can, cook outside. Pretty simple. If you're going to boil water for 10, 20, 30 minutes, if you cook outside, you don't have to worry about that humidity. It's gone. If you do cook inside, it's pretty simple. Turn on your vent fan to suck the air out. Leave the windows open. Run the fan the entire time that you're cooking, plus time afterwards. Just because you shut the burner off, just because you stop boiling that water, doesn't mean that the humidity is gone from the room. It will get absorbed into the wood. It'll get onto the wood. It'll get absorbed onto the windows. It'll get into all different stuff, and it needs to dry out. Being in southern Alberta, Canada, it dries out really quickly. Being in other places, you may have to run your vent fan for longer. So that's the first one. How about bathrooms? What to do in a bathroom? Well, again, vent fans. Run the vent fans when you're showering. But not only when you're showering, because when you're done showering, the walls are wet, the floors are wet, and that moisture will evaporate into your vehicle, whether it be a van, whether it be a Class A motorhome, whatever it is, it's going to evaporate in there. So you need to run your fans, your exhaust more. If you don't have an exhaust fan in your bathroom, either put one in of some type, whether it sucks through the wall, whether it goes through the ceiling, whatever, to get the moisture out so it doesn't get into your living area. But it just doesn't happen when you're showering. It happens afterwards. And I see this so often, not only in showering, when you dry yourself off and then people hang the wet towel inside their vehicle. And guess what? The way a wet towel dries is by evaporation, and it evaporates into your vehicle and makes your vehicle wet. But I also see this when people come in with wet clothing, whether they're at the beach for a day or whether they're out skiing or whether they're out snowshoeing. They come back to their vehicle and they take off all the wet clothes and they leave them hanging in the bathroom. Run the exhaust fan. Run something to vent the air out of your vehicle. And number three, from us, when we're sleeping, a big one. Open windows. turn your exhaust fan on low, or at least leave the vent open so you have a little bit of air exchange. Now, I can see the comments already, so let's address some of the comments. But when it's 30 below, yeah, and when you're 30 below, when you're in somewhere that's ridiculously cold, you're going to have to somehow vent the moisture, because that's when it's even worse. It gets on your walls and it freezes. It gets on your windows and it freezes. So you're best to vent it out as quick as possible. I'll see other people say, but if you live in somewhere that's really humid, well, I'm sorry, but if it's that humid, if water's running down the walls of your vehicle just because that's what it's like outside, well, guess what? There's nothing you're going to be able to do with it. But my big suggestion to everybody, and this works in no matter what you're in, what vehicle or anything, but it works much better in a van or an ambulance or a bus where the unit is one unit. And that is, when you're driving, leave windows open, leave vents open a little bit, no matter what the temperature is, to get some air exchange. But, and this is a big but, if you're in a van, if you're in a Class A, Class C motorhome, if you're in any type of vehicle that's connected, an expedition vehicle where the cab is connected to your living space, when you're driving, no matter what the temperature is, keep your air conditioner turned on, turn your heat up, and that will help to vent out some of the moisture, and then run the air so it's coming into the back and you're getting drier air back here. I did that with my truck camper. I started with my truck camper because I noticed there was a lot of buildup when it was 20 and 30 and 40 degrees Celsius below zero, and I noticed it built up on the walls. So what I did was I would open the vent during the day. I'd open a couple of the windows just a little bit, and when I went out, drove throughout the day, it actually helped to reduce the buildup of humidity in the vehicle. The ice didn't go away when it was that temperature, but it still helped to reduce the buildup, and I never had a mold problem. In my Class C motorhome and in my van, I keep the front vents running, blowing into the back as much as possible to create a dry air, and it helps to dry out your vehicle. But understand, if you have wet towels, they're not just going to dry and evaporate, and that moisture is not going to go into your air. It's going to be a problem. If you find yourself that you just got so much wet stuff, just so much stuff that you just can't seem to dry out, you may have to figure out a way of putting a dehumidifier in your vehicle. If it's that much moisture, if you're out skiing constantly and you're coming back with wet clothes day after day after day and they're not drying out, you may have to get something to dehumidify it. You may have to get an inverter in there and run it while you're driving so it sucks out some of the moisture. You may have to take that step to do it. The other thing that I see a lot of people doing, and it's again one of these problems, is that we get out of our bed, we make our bed, and all that moisture is trapped in between the sheets. It's trapped in between our comforters. Then you get it the next day and it builds up more. It gets in the next day, builds up more. Then you start to notice all of a sudden, well, my mattress has got mold to it. My sheets have got mold to it. That's because you're not letting it dry out properly. So again, open up the sheets, keep them an unmade bed, fold them back while you're driving so that the sheets and stuff will dry out as well. Only by air exchange, only by getting different living procedures, shall we say, will you stop the mold problem. No matter what you do with your build, you will not cut down on the mold. You will not cut down on the moisture problem if you don't vent it out somehow. No matter what insulation you use, no matter what wall material, floor material, ceiling material, you will not get rid of it. So I hope that helped. I hope that finally answered some questions. I've been asked about this a lot. But again, the only way to do it is vent. Leave the vents open. That's one reason I like the Max Air so much, is because I can leave it open when I'm driving. There's no issues whatsoever. I can leave it open during the day, at night, or whatever, and there's no issues. So I'll talk to you next time. Get out there, enjoy the great outdoors, and don't have a mold problem. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.